They're friends, and they got together and co-authored this book, and it's called Live from the Other Side. And it has to do with people who have died and crossed over. Maybe people got messages in the family, or they had deaths when the people was dying and they got messages. I don't know how else to explain it. I think you're going to have to do it better. But they have been collecting these stories, like, which is the one that were doing it in the hospital? It was you. Okay, she was getting stories when people were dying and from the family, and very interesting stories. Okay, so I'm going to let them explain their background and tell everything about how the book came about. It's Live from the Other Side. Okay.
So thanks for coming this afternoon. We appreciate your being here. My name is Maureen McGill, and I'm an associate professor at Pacific Lutheran University out on the West Coast in Tacoma, Washington. And I teach dance. That's my career, and it's been my career for over 30 years. And you think, what is a dancer doing up here, writing about live from the other side? But I truly believe that our awareness extends beyond the body, and my work has evolved in the last few years, about the last 10 years, into the intuition. And I work with the tarot cards. So I loved the lecture this morning. That was really insightful to have that as part of the conference. And in this work with the tarot cards and the intuition, I began to get stories from people. And these people would tell me stories about sensing their loved ones after they died. And they asked me to give some meaning to those stories, or would there be some meaning, or is it really true, or were they really there, or did I just imagine it? And so I decided to talk with Nola. Nola is a CEO of her healthcare corporation, and together we decided to write this book and collect stories and add philosophy and add some poetry, and we've even added some dance today to show you. I brought my dance video, very short video at the end that I'll show you. So Nola, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Nola, and my process in writing this book actually began when I was about 2 years old. I had a near-death, out-of-body experience that when that experience was over, I always saw the other side. And in that time and age, this is the late 50s, there was really no one to talk to about it. And I, too, ended up in a fundamentalist church where my parents went. And I specifically remember one Sunday, sitting in Sunday school class, and we were going to be saved. And I remember hearing the Sunday school teacher say, "Today you're going to be saved." And I thought, wow, I don't even know what that means, to be saved. And so the line formed where we were going to be saved. And I was standing in line, and it's just as clear as a bell. I could hear, there's nothing to be saved from. You don't need to be saved. We're all saved. And we're all loved. And I got thrown out. And I got thrown out of church twice, and that was a good thing for me, because then I could actually have a little more time for the other side. And then when I was 9, my brother died. And I remember the morning that he passed, and my grandma comes downstairs and says, "Your brother has gone away. Gone away." And he was still in the house. And I said, "Well, he's here." And they said, "No, he's gone." I said, "No, he's here." They said, "No, he's gone." And I said, "No, he's here." And they said, "No, he's gone, and don't talk about it anymore." And that really was the point that it drove me underground. And my biggest fear was at night, because at night, I even saw them better than I saw them during the day. And it terrorized me. And it wasn't until 1992, actually, where I had another experience where I was held at gunpoint, that I it's kind of like when you don't pay attention, we'll get your attention. And also remember, you wrote your own script. And so it was an awakening moment for me. And it became the point that working in healthcare, being a leader in healthcare, I knew there was more to this whole business of living. There was more to just taking care of people. There was the need to take care of people, not only our physicality, but our souls and our spirits, and to find a way. And so I set out on a journey to find a way. And it was actually through the studying with Healing Touch International that I met Maureen. And it is from there that Maureen's and my friendship grew. And one summer afternoon, she needed a sabbatical project, and we had lots of stories. And we thought, oh, what a great idea. We could write a book about people, their experiences that family members have with their family right before they pass, experiences they have after they have passed, and also do some work on how we heal from those who have crossed that we still remain very touched by in our lives. So it is a true pleasure to be here today. Maureen?
Nola has many gifts, which she just shared with you, but another special gift she has is she loves music. And she composed the most beautiful song for piano and voice. And I encouraged her to record this through the university and through the help of Pacific Lutheran University and some friends. And Brian Stenson is the soloist. He's a member of a group on campus called the Plutonics. And they're a group of singers that were on America's Got Talent last fall. He's got a terrific voice. So we're going to play the song for you that Nola wrote. Nola's on the piano during the recording, and Brian is singing it. We want to just take our space right now to that sacred place in our hearts of just quietude for a moment. I'd like you to reflect on the slide that's going to come up and be with that moment to know that they are with us. So we'll try the song now and the slide.
Can you see me? Can you see me? I am here standing near. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I am here standing near. Can you hear me? I am here, always near. I am here, always beside you here. I am here. I am here. Always, I am here, here with you. I am here. I am here. Will you know me? Will you know me? I am here, standing here. Will you know me? I am here, always near. I am here, always beside you here. I am here, I am here. I am here, am here. I am here. I am here.
So we would like to start out with our first story of today, which is in our book. And the story is called Time for Tea. Madeline was a resident in one of my skilled nursing facilities. And when she first came to us, she was very withdrawn and very, very quiet. And I walked by her room one morning and I thought, you know, she needs a visitor. And so I went in and sat down and we started talking. And we struck up a friendship that lasted for many years. But one of the things that she enjoyed most was she was from Yugoslavia and was first generation to the United States and loved sharing with people about her homeland and how her childhood back in Yugoslavia was. So we set up these traditions of having coffee and cookies every Friday. And I would bring the coffee service, and she would have the cookies. And for about a half hour, we would sit and visit every Friday. I ended up being transferred from that facility to another facility, but remained in contact with her and her family. It was about 5 years later when I was at work one day and got a phone call from the nurse at the facility saying, the family has asked me to call. They would like to know if you would come see Madeline. She has been actively dying for the past few days, and they're beside themselves because they don't know what holds her. Well, I knew she was a very, very devout Catholic, and I said, well, you know, has she had her last rites? And because I was sort of moving through that human mental checklist that those of us that work in healthcare kind of get programmed. And they was like, well, yes, we've done that. And I said, well, I'll be on my way. And in driving en route to there, it was like, just be present with her and don't try to figure anything out. Just be present. And so I went in, and when I look back on it now, I think it was odd, but I chose to sit down on the floor, and I put my left hand on her arm and just kind of looked down. And one of the things that I had come to understand about people who are getting ready to make their transitions, they are really charged up and ready to go. And they are very, very sensitive to noise. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that our best way of communicating with people who are about ready to cross, who have now reached a point that their eyes are closed, they're nonverbal, is on an intuitive level, that we can connect with them. And I just, on an intuitive level, said to her, Madeline, I'm here, and I've come to say goodbye. And I'd like to know if there's anything more any of us can do for you. And it was just like somebody saying, well, of course, it's Friday, and it's time for tea. And so, you know, when something like that happens to you and you're not quite prepared for it, it's like, really? Really? Okay. So I got up and I went out in the hallway and I said to the nurse, I said, Chris, I'd like you to go get the coffee service. And she just looked at me. I said, no, go get the coffee service. We're going to have coffee. And I went back in the room and said to her family, I believe, since this is Friday, she wants the final tradition for her, and we're going to do that. And so they brought the coffee service, and we had coffee. And we were very mindful that we weren't going to talk about what was going on, but we were going to talk about what special memories all of us held about her in our lives while we had our coffee. And we had our coffee and got done, and I went over and got back down, knelt back down on the floor and put my arm on her arm. And I said, you know, Madeline, we have had our coffee. Is there anything else that you would like us to do or to share with you? And it was just like the Lord's Prayer. And so I looked up at the family, and I don't have the Lord's Prayer memorized. So I said, well, you know, she'd like the Lord's Prayer. And I said, so maybe we can all say it out loud. So we said the Lord's Prayer out loud. And just as we got to the last part of the prayer, thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever, she was gone. It is an absolute honor on this earth. And I'm choked up today, so it's an absolute honor to be able to hold the sacred space when a soul leaves this earth. So many people look at our transition from this earth as being a hard thing, a tough thing. It's the normal genre of looking at it, instead of perhaps looking at it that it is the coming home to our essence, that point where we have completed a soul's journey here, and that perhaps if we encompass and we embrace these sacred moments, what we have to learn about living and what we have to come about knowing and what we have come yet to learn about love, and how love, even in those most difficult moments, becomes the most sacred thread that we share as they make their transition forward.
The other time about transitions is having to say goodbye to our parents. And I don't know about for you, but I think that's one of the most difficult times in our lives, is saying goodbye to our parents. And my dad passed away, and we don't have this story in the book. He was in the Midwest, and I was back on the West Coast. And they said that my dad had gone into a coma and that it was best to come home now so we could say goodbye. So I was there with my brothers, and we were upstairs in the ICU, and my brother, who was living in Denver at the time, had came in, and he looked at Dad, and Dad was, of course, sleeping in the coma, and he saw everything hooked up, and he looked at the doctor, and he said, you know, why is our dad hooked up like this? Our dad just wants to go to sleep. You know, our dad made those wishes clear. And the doctor turned to him and said, you know, an Irishman has 9 lives, and George was an Irishman, so you never know, you never know. So my brother went out to the hall with us, and we all just kind of took a breath, and so then we went home. And when we got home, a family member said to me, when is this going to be over? Is this ever going to be over? And I said to the family member, you know, I don't know when this is going to be over. You know, Dad has 9 lives. It's hard to know. I don't know. So we went to sleep that night, and here we are in Chicago, and this is a December morning when I woke up, and I was sleeping in the bedroom, and on the valance over the window was a great big butterfly. I mean, it was a huge butterfly when I woke up. And I looked up and I saw that butterfly, and then I looked away, and then I saw that butterfly again. And I turned to this family member and I said, Dad's going to go today. I think Dad's going to go today. Because as you know, the butterfly is the symbol of transformation. So what happens that day when we all leave the hospital at 10 o'clock, and that's the time Dad usually went to bed, Dad went to sleep. So sometimes the messages will come in symbols. And Nola has a story about her dad in passing.
Before I tell my dad's passing story, I'd like to talk just a few minutes about many times people end up with events taking place where they can't get to their loved one. That person lives all the way across the United States. A horrible auto accident has happened. They're getting ready to take that person off of life support. There's no way you can get an airline ticket. You can't get there. And in working with people in those circumstances, especially in healthcare, started working on a process with them of helping them to understand that we connect with people on a soul level. And that even when we cannot be with that person, when they're passing, that we have a way to sit very quietly and very calmly and to connect within our hearts, within our souls to them, and to send to them any final words or messages we would want them to have, and to also hold them while they cross. When I worked at a large skilled nursing facility, our hospice nurse, Michelle, came in one afternoon, and she was in tears. She was bawling. And I said, "What's wrong, Michelle?" And she goes, my uncle Oliver, he's dying, Nola. I won't make it. And she was so distraught. And I said, "Well, let's talk about this a minute." I said, "Share with me a little bit about him," and she did. And he carried a very, very important role to her in her life. And I said, "Well, Michelle, maybe first, it's not meant for you to be there physically because of how attached you are to him. But secondly, this is what we can do." And so we sat quietly, and she connected to that part of herself and sat there for about 10 minutes and got up, and she goes, "I know he knows that I'm with him. And I know I won't be able to get there before he crosses. But he knows I will always be here for him." And sure enough, she did not make it. Her plane did not take off in time. She did not get there. But she was able to fill that place within her of not being able to get there. In 1994, my father was in the last 5 months of his life. And in April of 94, he and I were sitting at my house talking. And he said to me, "I won't be back, honey. I won't be back to visit your house." And we had a very long discussion that night, and we shared a lot of tears together and a lot of love together. And I said, "I want you to know something, Dad." I said, "I promise you that when you cross, you will not cross alone. And I also promise you, I will be there for you, and I will be with you." So on August 2nd, the phone rang, and my father lived about 3-hour drive from me. And I headed to my parents' house, where for 3 days I sat with my dad. And it's very funny how you give advice to people, and then how life offers you an opportunity to use a little bit of your own advice. Because I always tell people, they'll wear you out. You may not be able to stay with them because of the role they play to you in your life. And if that is someone who always felt that they needed to be your protector, always felt they wanted to be the one that helped you, and certainly passing in front of you is not an ideal process for them. And so it was Thursday evening. It was close to 11 o'clock at night, and I stood up and I kissed my dad on the forehead, and I said, "Dad, I'll be back in the morning. I love you." And he had spent the whole day with his finger up in the air, and he kept saying, "Do you see them? Can you see them? Do you see them?" And it is not uncommon that as people get ready to transition, that the veil between the worlds comes down and that they are able to see, and many times to see people who they have loved and have loved them. And I spent part of the day with my dad saying, yes, and who do you see, Dad? So I left the house, went to my aunt's house, and went to bed. And at first I thought what I experienced was a dream, and now I know much better. But I saw myself walking down a road, and my dad was walking beside me. And we were actually walking down a road past his parents' house. And we were walking and talking, and I don't even remember what we were saying to each other. We were simply walking and talking. And he had a special way that every time he and I would go someplace, he would always crook his arm out like that, and I would take his arm, and we would walk that way. And we were walking that way that day. And we walked up this road, and I looked up, and I saw the most incredible light I've ever seen. And out of the light stepped figures, outlines. And I knew one was my brother, one was my dad's mom, one was my dad's brother. It was like this whole line of people. And I remember stopping and turning and taking both of his hands in mine and saying, you know, Dad, it's not my time. It's not my time to go yet. And I will stand here and be with you till you are ready. And they're there. They're there for you, and they're waiting to embrace you. I became awake or woke up or whatever, and the phone rang at my aunt's house, and my dad had just passed. It was a marvelous experience because I kept my promise that I could be there with him. But it was also a marvelous experience to see the other side so clearly and how clearly he was embraced. Maureen?
And they can give us messages, after they die, as you know. And sometimes those messages come in electronics, or they come as a song over the radio, or whatever it might be. Well, I have a story about Catherine and Gregory. And Catherine, by the way, did not want us to share this story until, she was going back and forth. I'll give you this story, I won't give it to you. It was so sacred to her, she didn't want it to have it published in the book. But right before I was sending the manuscript off to Julia, she called me and she said, you can use this story, and I was so happy to use it. Anyway, they'd been married for 19 years, and Catherine and Gregory had a summer place on the West Coast, but they lived on the East Coast. They lived in D.C. And all of a sudden, after these 19 years of marriage, Gregory got a very rare heart condition, and he needed a heart transplant. And he didn't make it. He died like 2 days before the heart transplant. And she was very devastated about this, and one of the traditions they had every year was driving across the country. They loved to drive across the country, and every time they drove across the country, they would come up to the Washington and Oregon border. And on the Washington-Oregon border, you're on the middle of a bridge. And when they were in the middle of the bridge, he would always say in the car, everybody shut up, everybody be quiet, because I'm going to sing Blue Bayou, the Linda Ronstadt version of Blue Bayou. And he would sing that Blue Bayou song every time they crossed that bridge. Well, you can imagine what happened. She decided to bring Gregory's ashes to the West Coast after he passed away. He didn't make it 2 days, before the heart transplant. He didn't make it. And so she piled the girls into the car, and back they went to the West Coast, and they were driving across the Columbia River Bridge, and they had the radio on. And they got to the line right in the middle of the bridge between Washington and Oregon, and what song came on the radio but Blue Bayou, the Linda Ronstadt song. So she said they pulled over, and they just kind of held each other, and they comforted each other. And she said, I know he was with me. I know he was with me. And I can't share that with everybody. It's just too strange of a story. But, I said, I know this will help many people, because I'm sure many people have had similar stories. So that was one of the stories where the message comes, through the radio. There's another great story that I have in the book where the message comes through fragrance. And this is an engineer who came up to me who said, Maureen, I am not a woo-woo person. There's nothing woo-woo about me. Yeah, but he said, I got to tell you this because I heard you were writing this book. And he's an engineer. He's doing a project. He lives in Western Washington, and he's doing a project in Eastern Washington. So he's staying at his brother's new home in Eastern Washington, and he's upstairs in the new house, and he's taking a shower. So he's standing there in the buff, taking a shower. And the window is closed, and nobody smokes in the house whatsoever. The sister-in-law, his brother doesn't smoke, he doesn't smoke. And all of a sudden, he's in the shower, and he smells cigarette smoke. I mean, tons of cigarette smoke. He looks around, there's no smoke coming in anywhere. And then he turned his head, and on the edge of the tub is sitting his mother in her special red event dress with her cigarette holder, puffing away, staring at him in the buff, And he goes, oh my gosh, Mom, And he kind of smiles at her, and they kind of connect eye to eye. And then he said, Maureen, I turned my head around thinking I'm crazy. And then he turned back, and he said she was gone. And he said, I know Mom visited me. I just know it. So he goes down to the breakfast table, and he tells his brother, you're never going to believe who I saw upstairs in the shower, And his brother said, well, did she like my new house? I don't know why she'd be here. Anyway, it was a short time after she passed, and it was so comforting to him. And he said it was just so out of the blue, that she would show up like that. So the messages can come, in so many different ways. Through electronics, through our senses, the lamps, the lights can turn on and off. It's remarkable, really.
You can get telephone calls on your cell phone, especially around anniversary dates, birthdays, anniversary of someone passing. And we have a story in the book about a gal who had actually, the cell phone number of her friend had been disconnected and had not been in use since her passing. And on the anniversary of her passing, everyone starts getting phone calls. The attorney who's settling the estate, and it's from her cell phone number. The two of the friends get calls on their cell phones, and they thought that the closest friend to her actually had her cell phone and was calling them. And she goes, well, no. She goes, I don't have her cell phone. Well, people were in such disbelief that they actually called her cell phone carrier. And they said, no, this phone has been disconnected for a long time. So you can have your telephone at your house ring and pick it up, and no one's there. And the first thing people can say, well, it's just those people who call and hang up. But if you start paying attention when the calls come, the same thing can happen with your cell phones. The same thing can happen that someone's favorite TV channel, every time, no matter what the channel is on when you turn the TV off, Mom's favorite channel is on when you turn the TV on. They love lamps. They love light fixtures. My dad was an electronics technician, and every once in a while, I think he tries to rewire my house. They also have the ability to come as an apparition. And I tell people that when they're talking about, many people want to connect with someone. It's like, oh, I just want to know they're okay. I just want to know they're okay. And then they end up with people saying, well, I had a dream about Fred the other night, and I saw Fred. So they apparate, they play with all kinds of electronics. They come to us in dreams, and about 60-70% of actually all interactions with the other side that people will have on a daily basis will actually be through a dream state, because we are much more relaxed, we're much more open. And then there are people who say, why don't I get messages? I have waited so long. So here's the deal, gals and guys. I see people on the other side. I waited 13 years for a visit from my dad after he crossed. And we have to be mindful that this third dimension is, as far as I know, the only dimension where time exists. So when we're looking at how much time passes, time doesn't exist in other dimensions. The other thing is, I truly believe that it is absolutely mutually agreed upon, these visits. And that part of our process of having these visits comes from us also when we lose someone that we dearly love, and that many times we can lose ourselves in that love and lose sight of ourselves and our own journeys, and they get buried within this person. And so when that person crosses, we feel empty, we feel devastated, we feel we have no purpose to our lives, and what are we going to do? We have a great story in our book about grief and how grief holds us. And this story is actually the story of my vice president of my company. Ray had Lou Gehrig's disease. And he ended up passing in March of 2007. And within 3 months of his passing, each of his 4 children had dream visits. And they would share those dream visits with their mother. And Patty was beside herself. Patty probably spent more time going and seeing psychics in 3 to 4 months than I've ever seen in my life. And one day she came into my office and said, "You know, Nola, I just don't know why those kids can have a visit and I can't." She said, she goes, "He is my entire world. He was my entire world. I don't even know what to do without him." And she goes, "But you know he's dead." And she said 4 or 5 times in a brief 15-minute conversation, she goes, "You know he's dead. He's dead. You know Ray died. He's dead." And I said, "So Patty, let's kind of think about this a minute. So let's imagine that you're there and I'm here. And I turn to you and say, 'Hey, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to have a conversation. But you know what? You're dead.'" I said, "You have to think about the message you're sending out. So maybe think about, do you honestly believe Ray is dead? Or do you believe that this physical body has been shed?" And she goes, "Well, I'm not sure, but I can tell you one thing. I failed my religion. I did everything my religion said I was to do, and I failed my religion. Therefore, I wasn't able to save him. Therefore, he's dead. Therefore, he won't talk to me." So we spent a course of probably on and off for 3 months having conversations about moving from that space of him being dead to that space of shed, from dead to shed. And it was at that point that her grief started to lift. 9 months after his death, she had a dream. And she dreams that she's with her grandchildren, and they're going to this house, and the house is called the House of Spirit. And she's scared of this house. She is afraid because in her dream, she hears you don't want to be in the house when it gets dark, because that's when the spirits come. So she and her grandchildren leave the house right as dusk is hitting, and one of the grandchildren turned to her and say, "I left my book in the house." Now, interesting enough, the child that left the book in the house was the grandchild that was closest to Ray before he passed. And so Patty says, "I'll go get the book." So she goes in the house, goes to the closet, opens the door. And as she's reaching down to get the book, the clock chimes. And it's dark. And she can hear footsteps coming down the hallway towards her. and she's panic-stricken. But she turns, and as the figure approaches, it's Ray. And he walks up to her, and he puts his arms around her, and he kisses her tenderly on the lips. And he says, I just want you to know, I will always love you. You are my beloved. She woke from the dream, and she said, you know, Nola, I touched my lips. I could feel that kiss on my lips for 3 days. I don't know what happened, but I do know that Ray was there and that he will always love me. Patty's life changed dramatically after that dream. It's just like she blossomed. What her husband saw in her and how she has moved forward in her life is absolutely remarkable. So what we would like to do right now is, it's a technique that we have been doing with people on connecting to your soul. And probably many of you know how to do this, but we're going to do it anyway. So what I'd like to do is I would actually like people to make sure your feet are on the floor. I would, anything that you have in your hands, you know, just kind of place your hands. You know, some people like to put their palms up. I think it works. Everyone has their own way. But what I want you to do is I want you to focus on somebody that's been very special to you in your life that is no longer part of this third dimension world. And I would like you, when you close your eyes, to feel where that first soul met your soul. And can you feel the touching, that thread of as each soul touched one another? When we talk about how we connect with the other side, we connect soul to soul, light to light. And no matter where we are within this universe, that is where that divine connection is. And in working people who have had loss, helping them find and experience where these souls, where this light touched you, and where, even though they're not here in the physical anymore, where they remain always with you forever. Maureen?
And it's that light that we often experience when our loved ones pass on. And I have a beautiful story about Phyllis. Phyllis's mother was aged and she wasn't very well, and it was a Sunday morning and Phyllis was on her way out of the house, and all of a sudden she heard her mother fall. And so she ran over, she got down on her knees, and her mother was passing. And she cradled her mother's head in her hands and cradled her mid-back and held her for a few moments, took a couple deep breaths and told her that she loved her so much. And just at that moment of saying, Mom, I love you so much, the most amazing golden light lifted from the right of her mom. It was just absolutely spectacular, she said. And it was all of this golden light, and as she watched the light move upwards, she saw actually her mom, actually kind of lifting up out of the physical body. And she smiled at her, and there was just kind of this moment of sweetness, but it was the overwhelming warmth of the light that kind of enveloped her that was so beautiful and loving. And Nola had a similar experience with her mom.
Before I share that story, I was working in the nursing home, and it was one afternoon, and the nurses came running down the hallway. They were on the run, and they run up and they say, "We have a problem down the hallway." And I said, "So tell me, what is it?" And they said, "Well, Mrs. So-and-so's daughter has just come out of her mother's room. Her mother's just died, and she's laughing hysterically. And we've never seen anything like this, so you need to come because she's laughing hysterically." And I said, "All right, I'm coming." So I went down the hall and I met her daughter, and I said, "How are you?" And she goes, "I am wonderful." And I said, "Well, would you like to tell me about that?" And she goes, "I would." She goes, "I was sitting beside my mom," and she goes, "You know how they get that funny breathing business that goes on?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "And right as my mom got close to her last breath, I saw my dad walk through the door." And she goes, "You know, my dad's been gone for years." And he walked through the door, and he took my mom's hand, and she got up from the bed, and they walked back out the door together. She said, "You know, I guess I should be sad that my mother has passed, but she is finally with the love of her life. And what more could I want, and what better reassurance could I possibly want?" When my grandmother was getting ready to pass, my mom was at the nursing home. I hang out in nursing homes a lot. It's 35 years of hanging out. But anyway, so Grandma was getting ready to go, and my mom's relationship with her mom had not been good. Actually, my grandma got divorced when my mom was 5. It was in the 1920s. It was not acceptable for a young woman to be divorced with a daughter. So my grandma hid my mom and really did not let her friends know that that she had a daughter until my mom was 16. And so it became a path of my mom to always prove her worthiness, that maybe someday she would be recognized and perhaps loved by her mother. My mom says it was getting towards dusk, and all of a sudden she started seeing this light fill the room. And she said, "Nola, it is the most beautiful colors I've ever seen in my life." She goes, "It was swirling lights of beautiful yellow and gold and orange and pink and purple. And it moved up from the foot of the bed to the top of the bed, around," and she goes, "I felt like somebody had wrapped me in this fleecy, warm blanket." And she said, "I felt so held and so loved for a few minutes. And then the light receded from the head of the bed back down to the foot of the bed and then out of the room." And she goes, "And then I realized that my mother had left."
I thought I needed to find a way, since I'm a dancer, to somehow integrate this book into my work this year. And as a choreographer and as a dancer, I think so many dances are just way too long. So I thought, how can I bring us to our hearts in just a short time? So I created a short dance about a street man who dies on the street, who then becomes an angel. And it's called Death and the Angel. So I'd like to share that with you. It's only 2.5 minutes. And after that, Nola has a beautiful poem that we wrote for the ending of our book. And we'd like to try to share a couple of stories, have you share a couple of stories with us here at the end. So we can try the video now. The dancer is Maurice Eckstein. He's not a dancer, he's from Trinidad. I have a dance minor program, so it's a club. But the beginning of the video is a little bit dark. It'll bring into the light as he turns into the angel. So here we go. It was sung by the Plutonics. That was the group on campus that sang it.
So we'd like to close with a poem from the last page of our book. In the beginning, we are of the light. The light is within us and surrounds us. We journey forth as light, moving into Earth's time and space. To the moment of our birth, this soul's journey. Lifetimes pass, the call comes. The reminder, the longing of our true essence. This calls our soul to come home. On earth, we know this as death. In the universe, it is the movement to be once again in and of the light. May you all be blessed. May you all know great peace. And thank you so much for sharing this day with us. Thank you.